stuff.
Okay, so we have a theist. I know Jeremiah has been waiting a while, and I want to jump to him, but we do have to prioritize the theist, and we have one coming. So we're going to be talking with, if this thing will pick it up, we're talking with Mats in the United Kingdom. Mats, you there?
Hello, am I on there?
Yep, you are. We can hear you.
Oh, okay, good. I was here last week talking about a similar topic, and they said to call back in, so I'm here again talking about biblical history.
Okay.
My topic is
not a lot of
the
correlation
atheist.
There's not a lot of correlation between biblical and history. There's not a whole lot of overlap there.
Oh, there is. There is. This is the point of my topic, which is that the atheist view of biblical history is ahistorical and also irrational.
Oh, the atheist view is irrational. Okay, so believing things that are not evidently true and are not even possible is rational, and not believing impossible nonsense for no good reason is irrational.
When you say it's not possible, how do you know this? What are you referring to exactly?
Well, let me see. In order to say that something is possible, then you need a precedent or a parallel or a verified phenomenon indicating that such possibility exists. What you're talking about is where a magic invisible man said abracadabra and poofed everything out of nothing. So how do we show that that's possible?
You show that that's possible by the historical record showing that people believe
Except that the
it
historical
based
record,
on verified.
right? The historical record doesn't overlap with the Bible much at all. So the historical record shows that people were around for millions of years, and previous forms were around for millions more years, and then there was never an Adam and Eve, and there was never a creation. Ever. There was never a creation. Even when you talk to cosmologists, there was never a time when there was just nothing. Never.
It doesn't
you believe somebody said abracadabra and everything popped out of nothing. No history supports that.
Is that what it says in Genesis 1?
Yes.
It just pops out of nothing. No, it doesn't.
Yes, it does.
No.
And there are other references in the Bible that explain that yes, it does. That it means creation ex nihilo, out of nothing. That God calls these things into existence, which means they did not exist already. So when you read more of your Bible than just Genesis, other parts of the Bible say, yeah, there was nothing, and God said abracadabra, and there it was, called these things into existence. Out of nothing.
Which scriptures are you referring to that say that?
Oh my God. It's just yet again where an atheist has to teach the Christian his Bible? Really?
Right. I don't think you understand what the purpose is. What do you think the purpose of Genesis was? The actual document.
Genesis is folklore. Genesis is folklore that is adapted from previous mythology, man-made mythology from earlier religions. You've got is pieces of the legend of Adapa and the legend of Enki and Ninhursag in the sacred garden of Inanna. In that, they introduce a character called Ninti, the lady of the rib, because she was made to close the wound to the side of this god. So that's where the lady of the rib came from. And
also
you've also
got story from the Epic of Gilgamesh. You're about to say, yes, that's correct, right?
Yeah, Lilith,
it's all from Near East Sumerian myth. I'm aware of all this.
Well, you're not apparently. I just had to explain it to you. So all of these way precede Genesis. Genesis was written around 6th century BCE, and these other myths are more than 1,000 years older than that.
You are a Protestant atheist. You understand that you are a Protestant atheist. You are taking a Protestant view of the Bible in which
I didn't realize we were in Northern Ireland.
Literal.
Every time I go to Northern Ireland, they ask me, am I a Protestant atheist or am I a Catholic atheist? And you're telling me I'm a Protestant atheist.
Got that on Hitchens. So the reason I'm saying this is because you're looking at in a very literalist way that you think it's not possible that God would have used the understanding of the ancient people for his own purposes, in the same way that he used
and
the
God
animal
himself is not
sacrifices, for
possible.
example.
God himself is not possible. But none of these stories in the Bible happened. We know that for certain.
We don't know that for certain, and we know from the resurrection of Jesus
evangelical Christians,
that it's that
even evangelical
a
and
majority of the
Catholic,
history in the Bible did happen, because it relies
virtually
the
none of
prophecies
it.
relating to
We
Jesus
know
rely on
for
it happening.
certain, even Christian geneticists, Christian biologists, Orthodox, Catholic, evangelical, they state publicly that Adam and Eve never existed. They're not even genetically possible. Francis Collins, for example, said that the evidence shows that humanity evolved millions of years ago from other apes, and that Adam and Eve do not fit the evidence. Kenneth Miller,
Why do you think it hinges on that story being literally true in the sense that they were in an actual garden near the river Euphrates and all this,
because
and that they were the
Christians
first
made a
humans ever
stupid
created out of
mistake
clay and all the
in
rest of it?
because Christians made a stupid
Do you know
mistake.
that in Jewish
Did you?
mysticism, it's actually, according to the apocryphal book of Baruch, it's actually where Eden exists in a
No,
spiritual form in the heavens.
no, that's not what it is at all. And you ask me questions and then make sure to interrupt the answer so that I can't give an answer. But you asked me what the purpose of Genesis was, and Genesis was a fable, a story with a moral, and it gives a choice, because we're not supposed to take the tree of not the tree of eternal life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. They're not literal trees; they're metaphorical. Adam himself is a metaphor, and so if his choice is that you can either live forever or eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, in which case you will be changed. You won't be the same person anymore. So they're talking about how they become like unto gods, how they learn morality. And so,
Yes.
So he had the choice of eating of the fruit of the tree, which of course he's going to do, because the story sets it up that he can't not do that. He has to eat because he is a mortal being. And so he has to eat.
What do you
And
mean
so
he has to eat?
What's that?
What do you mean he has to eat? What do you mean by that?
What if he doesn't eat, he will die. He will starve to death. So he has to eat.
No. You're confusing the tree of life and the tree of knowledge is the same thing.
No, I'm not. They're quite different. And you're the one that's confused. So God says that you can eat of any of the fruits of the trees. So God knows that they have to eat. We are animals, after all, which means that we are defined by having an internal digestive tract. We have to eat. We have to. Our survival depends on the death of living cells. Even if we're only eating the fruit, we're still eating living cells. The cells are still dying. So death is already in the world. And in the end of Genesis 3, God says, I've got to get Adam out of here, lest he reach his hand out and also eat of the fruit of the tree of life. And then he would live forever, where he's not going to live forever until he eats of that. Why else would there be a fruit of the tree of eternal life?
I don't understand why you think this is a point against.
What if Adam had never eaten from either tree?
You're arguing it's a straw man against the mainstream interpretation of it. This is why I said you're a Protestant atheist earlier.
I did not strawman.
You're arguing against the idea. You seem to think that. Explain to me how any of this proves that God doesn't exist or the events didn't happen. Generally,
we don't have to prove.
It leads up to the resurrection of Jesus, which we know that really did happen.
We don't have to prove unsupported assertions. We don't have to disprove what was never supported. So you want to say that fairies in the garden push up the daisies and that's what makes the garden grow, right? We don't have to prove that wrong. That's an unsupported assertion.
We have more evidence than fairies in the garden.
You don't have, you can't say you have more until you have some.
Was to guide the kingdom of Israel.
Some. You don't have any evidence at all.
It was never supposed to be taken as literally as you're suggesting and not trying to argue
right. It was a fable. It wasn't supposed to be taken literally. It was a fable. It was never supposed to be taken literally. And yet Christians do.
Yes, because that's a Protestant heresy, but most Catholics or Catholic scholars don't view it like that.
What? Ben?
But if I can jump in, like if we're talking about like, because you're bringing up metaphor versus literal interpretation, then, but there's an issue there too, because you need some justification for Jesus to be needed to save humanity, right? So, do you
Yes.
believe in the concept of original sin?
Original sin relates to the inherent imperfection of creation in that
Yes.
humans are imperfect and will sin, as in committing actions that are self-destructive, yes.
Yeah. Do you believe that Jesus was necessary because of original sin?
Yes.
Okay, and
Okay,
what is the
so
original sin?
how did that? Yeah, so what is the original sin? How did that happen in the
The,
world?
ori- the original sin is the fact that humans they live in the material world and they have free will that then, and the knowledge of good and evil, which leads them to having the capacity to commit morally bad and self-destructive actions. And so by living in the imperfect material world,
So here's an
therefore,
interesting moral issue then. If you're Do you think that it sounds like you're admitting that
That's not
humans were
original
set up to
sin.
fail this you're admitting that humans were set up to fail this whole time.
the interesting thing about this is the word sin in the original Hebrew doesn't mean what people think it means. It means missing the mark. So it's not like it's
Right.
not like
So
people.
do you think humans were programmed to miss the mark? So do you think humans were set up to fail this whole time?
They were not set up to fail. It's that God, because He values the idea that humans should have free will, and that they were created like this.
Why don't we?
Therefore, sorry, what was that?
I said, then why don't we?
Why don't we what?
Why don't we have free will?
We do have free will.
No, we don't. And in Christianity, we certainly can't. Because Christianity has God not only predicting everything we do before we do it, but he also takes us over to control what we will do if we were to try to do something else.
No, I don't think that's theologically sound.
Oh, okay. So you think that when God says that he's going to harden Pharaoh's heart, that's not theologically sound?
If you had read Paul's letters and extrapolation on this, you would know that it's because Pharaoh kept hardening his heart to the point that basically God allowed.
Except that it
God
wasn't
then
Pharaoh. It wasn't Pharaoh who did that. It was God who hardened Pharaoh's heart. Just like God
eventually,
comes
because
in,
he
just like
was
God
so
comes in a
obstinate.
handful of times. God comes in a handful of times in the Bible to say that if the scribes tell you something that is incorrect, it is because I have put a lying spirit into the scribes. Or if somebody believes something that is not true, is because I, the Lord, have misled them with a lying spirit.
You're confused
No, I'm
at
not
what stage
confused.
this happens. Theologically,
No, I'm not.
it's
There are no
where
stages here.
if people are obstinate and keep choosing the bad behavior, then eventually, then it's where God goes out of his way to just give
Yes,
them over
this
to it.
language is verbatim. This language is verbatim in Exodus. The fact that God hardened Pharaoh's heart, that is verbatim in Exodus. Are you
Yep.
disagreeing with the scripture?
Paul explains this, that the reason he does this is because Pharaoh was already being obstinate several times up to that point. So
See, that sounds like
he was already
Paul
given over
making
to
an
it.
excuse for the Old Testament
Yep.
to try to convince the early Christian cults of like his ideas. But
So
that's not
we
what
would
the
have to go
original
ask.
text said.
We would have to go ask Jewish rabbis how they reconcile this, because they don't have Paul, because that's a separate religion. That's a completely different religion that came along later. So I wonder how the rabbinical scholars deal with this, because it
Well,
does
that's
say
not
that,
entirely
that
accurate. That's not entirely accurate. I mean, modern Judaism
what's
is
not
after
entirely
Christianity.
accurate. What's not entirely accurate?
Modern Judaism came after the Second Temple period. It developed, rabbinical Judaism developed as a response to the destruction of the Second Temple. It's not exactly accurate what you're
When you
saying that it
say
was before
modern,
Christianity.
when you say modern Judaism,
Yeah.
was Moses a character of modern Judaism?
I'm talking about the Judaism that revolves around
But we are talking about
the
Moses.
exegesis of the rabbis that became the
What
writing of the
religion?
Talmud. The Talmud.
What religion wrote about the character of Moses?
The Israelite religion that predates Christianity and modern Judaism.
Okay, modern Judaism is predated by what?
Christianity.
You think modern Judaism is predated by the religion that came after it?
No, you're misunderstanding. You're misunderstanding the history of it. Christianity forms in the beginning of the first
I've only
century.
taken courses in the comparative history of world religions. I've only taken, in college courses on how these religions formed in sequence. So I'm the one that's confused, I'm sure. Jesus was Jewish, which means that Judaism precedes Christianity.
Well, the reason they were called Jews in the first century is because they were citizens of Judea, and they were ethnically Judean. But the modern Judaism, rabbinical Judaism, develops as a response to the destruction of the Second Temple when they were trying to find their place in the world again. So that the rabbis went back to the Torah to write to analyze it again, which is what the Talmud came. That's how the Talmud came into formation. But Christianity formed just before this.
Okay, before rabbinical Judaism, it was Judaism without an adjective, rabbinical. Is that so? There was an earlier form of Judaism.
That was Second Temple. That was Second Temple.
So before Second Temple, was there a First Temple Judaism?
Yes, but it wasn't technically called Judaism at that point. That was the Israelite religion, Yahweh worship.
Okay, so the Hebrew Bible and it is promoted by what religion?
The Torah was first written. Eventually the whole text came together during the Babylonian exile, and then from this, obviously,
so this is
Christianity
Jewish.
Came out of that, and then shortly after the destruction of the Second Temple, then the Talmud was
and Christianity came out of
Judaism. Is founded around that.
Okay, so now you're admitting that Judaism came first, and Christianity came. Well, not first. Judaism came before Christianity. There were other things that came before Judaism, but it wasn't Christianity. Christianity doesn't come until the Christ character.
Well, that's why I said modern Judaism.
Which also was not based on Christianity. Was not preceded by Christianity. It was preceded by an earlier form of Judaism.
It's not based on it, but it was preceded by it shortly, and there are references to Jesus within the Talmud, actually, which is how we know he was a real historical figure.
You wanted to argue history which proves the Bible, except that there isn't any that doesn't contradict the Bible. So give me an example.
Which parts of history do you think are not accurate to the Bible?
We know for certain that Adam and Eve never happened, that the Garden of Eden is just entirely a fable with not even a kernel of truth to that. Not even based on a loose...
It doesn't need to be literal.
Okay, so you admit Genesis, false, not history.
Not
Tower of Babel, false, not history. Not even a kernel of truth to that. Well,
the Tower of Babel is a poetic representation of Babylon, which was already named to the Israelite kingdom at the time it was written.
It's a more direct reference.
It's a representation of a monolithic culture and how this is not possible to sustain.
It's a more direct reference to the Marduk Ziggurat, which Hammurabi started, and that Nebuchadnezzar tried to revive, and he still couldn't complete it either. So that's the kernel of truth to it. But otherwise, the separation of the languages,
to the Israelites, the meaning of the story was that it referred to the kingdom of the Empire of Babylon. Yes.
The reason of the story was God gets angry because people get together and they can accomplish great things. So he gave everybody different languages to confuse us, to make sure we couldn't work together and accomplish great things, because God only wants to fuck us up, not do anything right. He doesn't want us to be able to do anything right.
Multiculturalism doesn't work. It's because to the Israelites, they had a homogenous ethno-nationalist society, and they viewed it so that empires don't work, which obviously they would observe in their own time because they were in exile in Babylon, observing
Tower of Babel didn't happen
within the empire.
The Exodus didn't happen. That's not history. Moses never even existed.
No, Moses probably did exist because we have archaeological evidence there was a dynasty within Egypt who were exiled from it around the time frame. But historians claim it wasn't actually the Hebrews because they have an irrational atheistic view of history.
Actual historians insist that Moses did not exist. So
because they have biased
some
reasoning.
rando says that Moses probably existed. No, he didn't. All the experts in this area, they know.
Your answer is always dodging the question. That you came in here to talk about the history, like biblical history, and then when we point out biblical history, you say, "Oh, well, but it's not always literal." Okay, well, so then give specific examples of what you're talking about. Then
the early parts of
that
Genesis
we should address with
literal.
you.
I didn't say all of it wasn't literal.
And then we try to point out, things that didn't happen, and we point out the pretty much consensus by historians, by regular historians, and by religious historians, and
the consensus is made.
And then as soon as somebody disagrees, Matt, as soon as somebody disagrees with you, you just say, "Well, that's bias." So it just sounds like you're dodging. Can you give us actual evidence of your claim? Like, give us an example. Give us an example of biblical history that you believe is true, and we will let you know what we think about it.
What does the archaeological site of the Tophet prove? The infant sacrifice, Canaanite gods. What does that prove?
What does what
Israeli
prove?
historians found.
So the cultures that these we have all these ancient myths that we're writing about, the places they lived and the enemies that they had, and they're making up a whole bunch of bullshit about it. And this is just something that all these cultures at that time did, made up rude stories about each other. So what does that prove? Good question. Doesn't prove much of anything, does it?
No, I'm specifically talking about the archaeological evidence that was found showing that the Kingdom of Israel were sacrificing human infants, burning them alive to Canaanite deities within.
Okay. So evidence that humans killed other humans sacrificially only gives evidence of a cultural norm at that time. It does not give evidence that the deities that they worshipped were real. Like, you have to give us more evidence beyond that. You just gave us evidence that people believed something was real.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to explain the point then. The mainstream historian view is that Yahweh worship develops out of Canaanite pantheon worship, and their evidence for this is what I'm describing, the infant sacrifice, and the fact that they worship multiple Canaanite gods. And they say that this is evidence of the fact that Yahweh originally was just in the Canaanite pantheon. However, if you actually read the Bible, you'll know that from the time of King Ahaz, Canaanite worship was then implemented into King of Israel, and the Bible details specifically and explicitly how they turned away from Yahweh and started sacrificing infants. So the point I'm making is there is archaeological evidence of things in the Bible. It's just that the motivated reasoning of the secular historians tries to spin it and
there's evidence of things that don't prove the supernatural.
It doesn't mean.
Yeah. There's evidence of mundane things.
I like the way you dismiss all the experts, all of the archaeologists and the biblical historians and so forth, by saying, well, would you actually read the Bible? And you yourself were not aware of the parts that I was just talking to you about. Like when we talk about these sacrificed children, are you not aware of when Ezekiel laments that the 10 commandments in Exodus 34, not the ones in Exodus 20 and 21, but the ones in Exodus 34 call for the firstborn children, firstborn boys, to be sacrificed to God. And then Ezekiel makes the lament that God had created these laws by which they couldn't live because it horrifies these people that they have to sacrifice their own sons. See, that's what happens when you actually read the Bible.
You're misreading the text.
Oh, I'm the one that's misreading
You're misreading the text. He's lamenting the fact that they turned away from God, misunderstanding the commandments and sacrificing infants when really it was about the first fruits of all of their animals.
No, it isn't, and we can prove
that.
It is. So I'm not reading this.
This is what I mean about the biased reasoning of secular historians trying to make it where it doesn't mean the biblical narrative.
When you read what the Bible actually says, it actually says that. And then people always say, well, that's not what the Bible says. And then I show them, and they say, well, that's not what it means. But it's not my bias. It's your bias that you want to believe it anyway, regardless of what it says. So you don't know what it says. You want to pretend that it says something else. That's your bias, not mine. So show me history, and I can look up the history. You think there is history that proves God? What is it?
Okay, well, you've completely dodged the fact that I pointed out that the Bible describes that period of time, and then that's accurate history.
Would you not agree that
also,
the Hellenist religion also describes the time in which that religion was founded?
what? I'm sorry. What do you mean? What do you mean by this?
Have you never heard of Greek mythology?
Why are you bringing up Greek mythology? I don't understand what this.
They discovered archaeologists discovered the city of Troy. Does that prove Greek mythology?
You're drawing a parallel, saying that just because they find shrines to Zeus doesn't mean Zeus exists, for example. That's what you're saying.
Right. So you find a circumstantial thing that matches the time period of when they're talking about the people around them. The people around them existed. Not all the details of the story, no. Yeah, they have a real setting most of the time. The stories, the fictional stories, occur in a real place, and sometimes they name real famous people. But none of that proves God. So give me a bit of history that you think proves God.
The proof of God is in the fact that there's a narrative through line that you see all these historical events matching events in the Bible, stacking up.
Okay, so you're proving Lord Krishna? Or are
you're proving almost every religion on this planet by that point.
No.
Islam could easily make those same arguments.
Religion has the ultimate proof in the form of Jesus, which is what it all leads to.
Which we know the ultimate proof in
he
the
was
form
a historical person.
He wasn't the first Christ. Lord Krishna was, and the criteria that you just gave for the narrative comes not from a single book, but from a library of different books that are older than the Bible. And they all have this single narrative for the Hindu pantheon. They're Trimurti, not Trinity, Trimurti, where you have three independent people within a unified Godhead, which is where Christianity gets a lot of its ideas. So you're telling me that this unified narrative in all of the folklore, in this volume of folklore, proves Hinduism.
You think Christianity is based on Hinduism when they had no contact with that region whatsoever?
No, I don't think that Christianity is based on Hinduism. I'm saying that your logic is flawed. You think that a storybook, a small compilation of Aesop's fables, somehow proves a god, but the criteria that you give would mean that the library of books of Hinduism prove their Trimurti, not your Trinity.
No, that's not the case, because they don't have disciples and apostles, first-time witnesses, and then their disciples who were absolutely convinced
neither does
that
the Bible.
Saw the resurrection happen.
The Bible also does not have first-hand witnesses.
Yes, it does.
It sounds like we need to go into all that too.
No, it doesn't.
Explain to me why Clement is familiar with the text of the Gospels, and when he exists within the living memory of the disciples, he's the disciple of the original apostles, and how does he know about the text of the Gospels, which he references in his letters?
Do you think
which means,
Paul
of course,
met Jesus?
the Gospels were written by the Gospel writers, which means they are the first-hand witnesses, which means they were convinced they did see the resurrection happen.
No, they weren't. No, they didn't.
Yeah.
And why is it that all the Bible scholars universally say that no, they weren't, no, they didn't?
Because they're all
there are no eyewitnesses.
Have motivated reasoning.
No eyewitnesses wrote the Gospels.
So anything that disagrees with you is biased. That's what your whole argument boils down to.
Once again, we're asking for history that proves God.
Why is Clement familiar with the text of the Gospels?
Okay, so some guy believed in the fairy tales that he read about, or that he read. Yeah, okay. But
give me history. You know who Clement is.
Give me history that proves God.
Do you know who Clement is?
Not off the top of my head. Remind me.
Clement is one of the first apostolic church fathers, which means he's the disciple of Jesus' disciples, which means he was tutored by them. In his writings, he references the gospel writings. It means the gospel already existed in memory of
that would not be first-hand witness, though, because
Yeah.
That would be, you said the disciple of the disciples.
Nor would it be history.
That's already removed from the actual disciples, though, right?
It proves that the gospel accounts are the first-hand witnesses.
No, it doesn't.
That's the point.
No, it doesn't.
It does. You're just coping.
No, it doesn't.
No, so Matt, so if the Mormons, Matt, so if Joseph Smith went off into the woods and said that he found some golden plates and came back and somebody said, "Oh yeah, well I know Joseph Smith. I know that he went into the woods and found the golden plates." Like, that doesn't mean that person, like, just because that person claims that doesn't mean that Joseph Smith actually went into the woods and found the golden plates. The disciples could have been telling.
If we're talking about
but the disciples could have told. So if there's a disciple of the disciples, that means the disciples could have told their disciple whatever they wanted, and it doesn't mean that they were actually eyewitnesses. Right?
Yeah,
we see the same thing done with cults all the time. This is how cults are founded and expand.
Okay, but in this analogy, there's like 5 Joseph Smiths who all agree on the details of this guy's life, and they all are absolutely convinced that this guy was resurrected, and they're even willing to die for it.
Right. So we know that the Gospels copy each other to some degree, yeah, and a lot of mythology does. A lot of the Bible is actually copied from Homeric epics too. That doesn't mean that Homer was real, or that anything he did was real.
How do you, when you say they copy each other, why? I don't understand why that's a point against the fact that they agreed on details or anything like that.
The details of things that never happened, common adventure tropes.
You're just already assuming they didn't happen. This is what I mean about the motivated reasoning. You already start from the circular premise. I know they didn't happen because it seems absurd to me. So I'm
know for certain that the global flood never happened. Period. Proven. Absolutely not. Many different fields of science. There's all kinds of different ways we can know this. We know for certain global flood never happened. This isn't speculation. This isn't a bias. We know it didn't happen.
We know there was not a man. You're doing the Protestant atheist thing again.
We know there was not a man who lived 3 days inside a fish. We're looking for not things where the history proves the Bible wrong, as it does over and over and over and again. We're looking for a place where you say history shows the Bible or that God is true. So history that proves God. Give me that.
All right, I'll go backwards and give you then. The fact that the Catholic and Orthodox churches exist, the fact that the early Christians were persecuted to death on the absolute belief that they knew the resurrection had happened, the fact that historians agree Jesus was a real person who existed, the fact that the prophecies of Jesus' life, which match his life one-to-one, such as in Isaiah and in the prophecies of the Essenes, are real documents that exist that have been carbon dated to show that they were written before the time of Jesus. The fact that
Jesus did not meet any of the prophecies. The Jews have this long list of prophecies their Messiah was supposed to achieve. The only thing Jesus did was that he was Jewish. That's the only part that he met. So none of the significant stuff.
No.
And it doesn't matter. It does not matter that some weirdo believed a ridiculous thing. We're looking for history, something we know actually happened, and that also proves God. You don't have history that actually happened. You have that people believed a fable, and some people died for that fable, just like they did in a bunch of other religions too. Just like the Sikhs versus the Hindus. When you study comparative mythology and religious cults and stuff, you find out that people actually killed themselves over their beliefs a lot. So Christianity is not at all unique in that. So give me history that proves the God.
All right. Here, how about this then? The destruction of the Second Temple. Explain to me why that didn't dissuade the initial early Christians and make them think, oh, it's not real.
Because the story was written after the temple was already destroyed. Most prophecy is written after.
That's immaterial. That's immaterial. That doesn't change the point. The point is, why would they be so convinced? They see their people.
There's an issue. There's an issue here with your.
Into exile again.
There's an issue here with your thought process.
But then they
There's an issue here with your process, your thought process. Mats, didn't you get mad at us like this whole call for us being biased towards a particular conclusion? That seems to be a lot of projection because this whole time you have been biased in favor of your religious conclusion. And I don't know if you're aware, we've tried to mention this multiple times, but we don't have the burden to disprove all that. It's actually like when we're thinking about science and the scientific method, you should be taking the position of the null hypothesis until you can reject it. Right? So you should not be entering this with the assumption that all of this is actually true. And even then, we start to point you to actual references in the Bible, and then you seem to disagree with what the Bible actually says. So either the Bible's not clear and intentionally unclear. So how do we know what you're supposed to mean by any of it? Like, how are we supposed to know which parts are metaphorical and which parts aren't? That seems very confusing for a God who is supposedly trying to get us to the right answer. And it just seems like you already have assumptions that you're trying to justify with however way you can spin the data.
Well, that was a bit of a gish gallop, but I'll try to respond to this.
That was a gish gallop. A Gish Gallop, named for Duane Gish, a young Earth creationist who would lob out all of this information, all of these claims, none of which could be supported. Not one of them was true, but it would be to overwhelm the opponent because they don't have enough time to address this. He didn't do that. He listed mistakes you made, really, during this show, and you can go back and watch it. You have not presented
any mistakes with my view of the Bible.
You've done nothing but. You said that the Bible concords with history, but you admit that the Bible doesn't concord with history on all of these different points that we just pointed out. And you can't show, and you said history proves God, but you can't show any history that proves God. All you can do is say, well, look, when this guy lived, there were people who already believed in this bullshit. We know that. That doesn't prove it was real.
You didn't answer the question of why did these first century Jews, why was their faith in this apparent Messiah not persuaded by the fact that the Second Temple destruction happened and that they saw their people be genocided and exiled yet again?
Why would I have to explain anything? Why would I have? Why is the burden of proof on me?
Why were they still committed to it?
Why? Yeah, because they bought into a cult. They were taught certain things about this cult. And they were told that they had better believe it no matter what. So when I argue with creationists, I can prove all kinds of things, but they're going to reject all that information because they're told to believe things that are not evidently true and to reject all of the proof against it because the proof is coming from the world and we're not of the world. We're from magic land of a pure imagination, but we're not of the world. That's where these idiots are coming from. That's why they had this position. Now, can you show me
this is an insult
that proves God? Go.
That's such an insult to the Jews. Why would such a people as that, such a insular, homogenous people, why would they abandon all of their thousands of years of cultural baggage and customs to follow some heretical Messiah?
All right, you were about to get booted because I don't believe you're sincere. Okay? I think you're just
sincere. I was here last week.
I think you're a troll.
I'm sincere.
I ask you, okay, do I get one last shot? This is your last shot. Give me history that proves God.
The existence of Jesus.
Fuck. Somebody who's not even a historic character. Goodbye. No, Jesus is not a historic character because he is not mentioned in history. Nobody knows when he was born. Nobody knows when he died. Nobody knows how he was born or how he died. They don't know where he lived because there's conflicting different stories about that. There's a general consensus that there was a first century faith healer and cult leader who misled all of these people and demanded they give him all of their money and not even have enough left to live on so that they don't even have to worry about eating because he's a faith healer. That's exactly what faith healers do. Give me all your money and I'll bless the poor with it. That's his whole game. So Jesus is not a historic character. He's not in history. There's no history of Jesus. There's just a roundabout belief of this cult leader at some point, who was born at some point, and conflicting accounts even within the Bible about when and if and how he died. So not a historic character. So you're done.